welcome to Veteran Voice. My name is Larry McCullaugh. I'll be your host today. My guests today are gentlemen who have been here before. You may have seen a previous program, and we had a lot of information, so we brought them back. Sitting on the left is Mr. Sam Burrage, star of stage and screen, who's a Vietnam veteran, and sitting next to him is Mr. Tom Rundles, who is also a Vietnam veteran, officer in the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 337. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
We ended last time with a lot of things that we were still talking about. One of the things that we talked about was the Tet Offensive of 1968. And there are probably a lot of people out there, it's things that we know about that the audience may not know. Sam, well, if you could let's talk about what Tet of 68, talk about what Tet is and kind of clarify that for everyone.
Well, I had the unique experience of seeing it from the very beginning, because I got there in January of 1968, and it started around the end of January of 68, and it is the Lunar New Year, the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, and it is a very special holiday period for the Vietnamese people, and supposedly it's a time of ceasefire, where, people celebrate more than anything. But the enemy, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, knew that it would be a very opportune time to send a very strong message if they would take advantage of the Tet holiday. And they took advantage of it to launch a well-coordinated attack that was countrywide in South Vietnam, at all the major cities across the country simultaneously, and we were caught off guard by it. We were, and it was a devastating thing psychologically and politically for the American people back home. Militarily, for the enemy, it was an unmitigated disaster, because in about 3 or 4 or 5 days we had retaken everything and had dealt them heavy casualties, heavy losses.
We were at that point mopping up the pockets.
And you were there too, Tom, I think, during that time, and you can talk about how much it was a failure it was for them.
Tet, like you said, it's a very important holiday. It's like our 4th of July. They celebrate it, shooting off fireworks, all sorts of stuff. But the main thing is, it's a major holiday. And what did they do? They sent non-essential personnel home to spend the holiday with their families. So whenever the offensive happened, the bulk of the defense had to fall on the American forces at that point, because the Vietnamese forces were at their weakest ebb at that particular time. The Radio Hanoi, which was, everybody knows Hanoi Hannah. Well, Radio Hanoi was the trigger for the launch of this offensive. That's why it came off. Everything happened at precisely the same time. There was no 4 or 5 hour delay between the attacks. When Saigon got hit, Hue got hit. They were opposite ends of the country. They both got hit at the same time, because the signal was sent from Radio Hanoi, commercial radio. The ones that kept saying, "Hey, Charlie, welcome to the unit."
I think that and as we know anyway, when this happened, it was very well planned. There was a ceasefire in place. Nothing was supposed to happen. And what the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong expected to happen is that all the citizens of South Vietnam were going to raise up and help them and join them and fight the Americans.
Throw us out in one final bang.
And that never materialized. That was one of those things where they thought that everybody in the South wanted to have Ho Chi Minh as their leader, and they all wanted to be the same. And consequently, they found out that the people did not rise up, and they did not try to take out the government. So
it was a total miscalculation. The people's uprising just did not materialize. It did not happen. Ho Chi Minh, I think, was still living at the time. He was an elderly man who would soon die, but he was a tremendous figure for the the little rice guys that were out there fighting. You know, I mean, they had a lot of faith in this guy, and that's one of the reasons why the willpower of the peasants out there was so strong, because of you know what they've been fighting for 2,000 years. You know,
Yeah.
they had defeated the French at Dien Bien Phu, and so they
They
you know.
run the Chinese out first.
You know, they had a lot going for them that you can't measure. You know, that's inside of them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
but they didn't rise up. That didn't. The American influence was pretty doggone strong too.
It was.
And Tom, I know, and Larry, you too. I feel sorry for a lot of Vietnamese that I personally came to know when I was in Vietnam, who were solidly behind us and who loved the American people and would have given anything to get out, you know, when the end came. I can remember a lady I worked with named Miss Chow. She was really something. I mean, she dressed American. You know, she didn't dress like the Vietnamese. She would dress like an American woman. And she had a little money, you know, kind of well-to-do, and she wanted to be, she just loved it. She spoke pretty good English, you know, I don't know what happened to her. I have no idea what happened. I worked alongside of her in the airport when I was in the Air Force in Vietnam. Miss Chow, I don't know. I don't know what happened to her. And I'm sure you knew, Tom, many Vietnamese. You were mentioning a family that you knew.
One of my fondest memories was of a Vietnamese policeman named Phan, and that's where I learned more about the culture and the people. I got to know him. I got to know his family, and the differences between their culture and ours. One of them is like dining. He invites me to his house for dinner. The big meal in the Vietnamese is chicken, in the Vietnamese diet. These cats and dogs things is for other reasons and other purposes, and yes, they do eat them, but in this case, it was chicken, okay? In America, we're taught, clean your plate, eat all your food. It's a compliment to your host if you do so. Well, in the Vietnamese culture, if your guest cleans his plate, then he is not full. He needs more food. And so they will keep passing food to your plate until you can't eat anymore. So that was just a small thing, but that was just so many of those little small things that were so different in our cultures. And they were a beautiful people. They had their foibles just like the rest of us. They had their outsiders, they had their outlaws, but overall, the South Vietnamese people I had a very positive experience with. Very positive.
You know, I think that's one of the things that we encountered as young men. I know that the average age of the guy that was going over there and fighting was like 19 years old. I know I was 19 when I got there. And you're still young. I mean, you know it all. At 16, we know it all. I mean, you know, the older I get, the wiser I find out my father was. But at 19, you know everything there is, especially after you've been through training. And, you know, I must be a man. They've given me a high-powered automatic rifle, and I'm walking around without adult supervision. I must be a man. But we got over there, and I don't think that we were ready. You know, they trained us so much for the battle. I don't think they took into consideration the cultural differences that we were going to see and experience. And when you're 19 like that, and you see what they're doing, you're thinking, well, these people are weird. And at the same time, these people are looking at us and going, boy, those Americans, I'll tell you, they're not playing with a full deck. And it's simply because they're halfway around the world. I mean, I remember when it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in the United States, or in my hometown, it was 2 o'clock in the morning there, and I thought, you can't get any farther away from home than that. I'm on the opposite side of the world. And the culture, and I think that maybe had something to do with the misperceptions of what our government did, was not paying enough attention to the Vietnamese culture and the Vietnamese history, because as you mentioned, they'd been fighting for 2,000 years. All they ever really wanted was their own country. And actually, Ho Chi Minh had made an agreement during World War II that the Vietnamese would help to fight the Japanese in Vietnam. and the conditions being that when World War II was over, if they won, they would be allowed to be their own country. Well, everybody agreed with them because World War II, you're going to deal with the devil to win it. And then when it happened, the French reneged and said, well, we've changed our mind. We're still going to keep you as a colony. That consequently led to Dien Bien Phu and the French leaving. And at that time, the Americans were, providing a lot of the money for it. And it went on from there. Now, something that I've always done with guests in the past is ask. There are certain experiences. I tell people I had the best times and the worst times of my life in Vietnam. There's got to be some stories, hopefully something that you can tell on the air, that happened to you. That some of the more, I can remember my father saying, "Someday you'll laugh at this," and I never thought I would. But like I say, I can look back on it now. What wasn't funny then is funny now. If you got anything, Sam, that you can...
I tell you what, we're on television. That's hard to do.
Amen, Sam. Amen.
That's hard to do. But there are a couple of things that one in particular, I guess, I could probably, there were some good times. There were. It was not a situation where it was depressing every day. There were many happy moments. There were many fun moments, and I can recall one that that really opened my eyes to the world of music, you might say. I had gone to eat, at the cafeteria. And I sat down, to enjoy a meal after having just a routine day at work, just work. That's what we were doing, processing people at the airport to catch flights in country to send them to Pleiku, An Khie, Ban Ma Thuet, Phan Rang, Saigon, Chu Lai, whatever. We just sent them around. I can still remember the names, never will forget the names of many of the countries. Vung Tau. I always wanted to go to Vung Tau.
Really? Yeah. I heard stories.
But I sat down and was getting ready to enjoy this meal, and we had a little video, had a little TV, and I had never really heard this guy sing before because I just never took the time to listen. And this time I was a captive audience, so I sat down and I got a chance to really see this guy sing. And you'd be surprised who it was. And I became an instant fan and a permanent fan of Frank Sinatra.
Exactly. So
I had never really listened to Frank.
Old blue eyes.
Really? Yeah. And he was in his prime at that time. I mean, I was mesmerized by this guy. His phrasing and how he could handle a song and put his take on a song. And it may have been Count Basie doing, the instrumentation of what the band, I don't know, but Frank was the guy. And I sat there, and it was about an hour-long concert, and it just blew me away. That was one of the most memorable things that was fun for me. I became a lifelong Frank Sinatra fan because of Vietnam.
Well, we darn. It's really because at that time, Wilson Pickett and
Oh,
James Brown and all. There was
yeah.
a lot of great soul music coming out.
Absolutely.
Even the white guys
Jimmy.
were playing the soul music back then
Yeah.
because it was good stuff. Well, Tom, have you got a story that you can relate without?
I understand this is supposed to be fit for public consumption.
Yeah. We do have a mixed audience.
Yeah.
We got a lot of our younger people watching this.
Well, a favorite story. No, I can't really say that I do not, but like Sam, there are so many times it was not always dreary. It wasn't all blood and guts. It wasn't fear and sweat. There were good times. Marathon poker games. I played poker one night when I could do no wrong. I played for a straight 13 hours all night long, and whenever it was over, I was the last man standing. I was king of the table. Cleaned everybody. Loved it. We used to have these, because we got paid in Monopoly money, and these marathon poker games were just a way. We could only send 200 home. That's all they would allow us to send. And the rest of it, it takes you about $50-$60 to get everything you need for the month. You're sitting around there, $200-$300 kick around. So you play poker. And I I enjoyed my visit to Cameron Bay. It's a very beautiful place.
Beach. It's a
It is.
beach.
It is gorgeous. I imagine even more so now because the barbed wire's gone.
Yeah.
The Tanglefoot's gone and the watchtowers are down. I would imagine it is an extremely beautiful place by now.
It was a beautiful country when we were there.
Oh,
If you didn't notice all the craters and
I'll tell you,
What
whenever
you
you
going
were
on?
driving down the road and looking out across this rice, this blue-green waves of grain, just seas of it, it looked like nothing was going on. You get in a chopper, you get about 50 feet in the air, you start seeing the moonscape, the craters here, there, yonder.
Where'd you go on R&R?
I went to the Philippines.
Philippines. Okay, that would
went to
be
Manila.
Clark, Manila. Yeah.
No,
I never did get there. I wanted to. Real
I went
bad.
to Manila, but I got there right in the middle of their elections.
Oh,
now,
man.
these people take their politics seriously because I get to my room, complimentary newspaper, open it up, headlines, 28 more die in election shootouts. They were told,
Should've
you
gone to
guys,
Sydney."
until this thing is
Is that where
settled,
you
most
went?
of you guys need to stay kind of close to your home base. And so we did our drinking and partying in the hotel. But that gets boring. You're there for a reason. You got to see something. So I went up to Lake Taal. That's a beautiful place up there. Well, it was before Manitoba. I
Mount
don't know what it
Pinatubo.
looks like now.
Mount Pinatubo. Yeah.
you know,
Where'd you go, Larry?
on my R&R, I was part of a pilot program in 1971 where they actually allowed guys to come back to the United States. Now, you had a 2-week R&R, so like 4 days of it was eaten up with nothing but travel time. But it allowed you 10 days at home, and I was part of the pilot program because they wanted to see how many guys would actually come back from the United States. At that time in 70 and 71, there was, a lot of guys, everybody knew it was pretty much over. And they were concerned of who was going to come back. Well, I was young and naive, and I just wanted to go home. My mother had died a couple of months before I got drafted, so I was very close to my father and my brothers and sisters, and I had a lot of friends because I was in a band and knew a lot of people. So I went back to Muncie, Indiana, and spent 10 days and partied and had a good time, and saw people. My brother had his Road Runner. We had neat cars, and then I went back to Vietnam, and it was funny when I got back because I got off the plane from Da Nang up to Quang Tri, and I'm walking into the company area, and everybody's looking at me like they're looking at somebody who's died or something. And I'm looking around going, what's the matter with you guys? They said, we didn't think you were coming back. And I said, what made you think I wasn't coming? They said, well, nobody is going to get back to the world's going to come back to this after they've been here for 6 or 7 months. Why'd you come back? And I said, I didn't want to be a deserter. You guys don't know what you're doing over here. Somebody had to come back and help you all out. And the really funny part was they said, well, we got a poll going on how long it was going to take them to find you. And I said, well, what were the bets? And they said, oh, any place from a month to like never. And I said, well, who bet that I'd come back? And they said, nobody. So I got the money.
Hey,
So that was my R&R experience.
R&R being rest and
Rest-
recuperation,
right.
for people that, I took mine in country.
Did you?
I stayed
Did
in
you?
Vietnam. Well, the reason was because where I was at a place called Quyen Yan, it was a beautiful city. I mean, we talk about how beautiful the
French
architecture
influence was
is.
still strong there.
Very strong,
Very
very
strong.
strong. And I said, why do I need to go anywhere? The village is on limits, 70, 80% of the time. I can party right here. So I just took off and didn't go to work for, my R&R time and had a blast.
Really?
Right there in country. If I had left Vietnam to go anywhere, I always wanted to go to Malaysia, at Kuala Lumpur. I wanted to go to Kuala Lumpur, and I wanted to go to Australia.
I did too. I always wanted to go to Sydney.
That was supposed to be the happening place with Sydney.
I heard a lot of things
I heard a lot
about
of stuff,
Sydney.
too.
Oh, I did too. Also, at the time we were doing our stints over there, I read an article that said that the women in Australia outnumbered the men 3 to 1. I liked the
I
odds,
heard that too.
but I never got there.
I know guys that got there and decided not to come back. They liked it that well.
I can believe that.
But I guess that happens in any.
But
any war.
in the Vietnam War, it was an individual's war. Each of us went as an individual. Each of us came back as an individual. Very few went as a unit. Very few, none hardly, except in the very waning days, came back as a unit. we went, we formed friendships, we lost friends, and we abandoned those friends when our time ran out. They sent us home, and then we live, even today, here it is, 39 years later, there are individuals, I wonder if they made it. I don't know. I'm constantly looking for a familiar name. And this was the hardest part, I think, was you go over, you're a newbie, you're unproven, you're almost ostracized until you prove yourself. Once you prove yourself, then you start being part of what's going on, and then you do the same thing to the next new guy that comes in. But whenever he proves himself, then you start forming this bond. It's hard to call it a friendship because it's deeper than that.
Yes, yes, it is.
And it's only experienced in that environment, never anywhere else. And then, because he came late and you came early, you leave early, and you never know whether he makes it or not. And this is a lesson I do believe that they did learn. This is not good. This has long-lasting effects on people.
It can happen to you out of the blue too, and thanks to this thing we call the computer, out of the blue in my life, about 4 months ago, some guy, you know, I got this letter, and it said, are you Sam Burrage, who served in Vietnam at a place called Quin Yan? My name is Norman Bradford, and if you are, please call me. He said, I found your name on the computer. He's one of these guys who's very diligent about, you know, trying. He wants to be a writer. He always was great with words, and I said, Norman Bradford. I remember Norman. I said, I bet in some of the pictures I've got, and I looked, and there he was with a Nehru jacket on. Yeah, I don't know if you remember the old Nehru jacket.
Oh, yeah.
Much as we to admit it.
You're aging yourself, Sam.
There he was, standing there in a Nehru jacket, a white Nehru jacket, a black guy in a white Nehru jacket. I said, that's Norman Bradford. And he writes me out of the clear blue. And then I got on the phone, and I was nervous, you know, and man, oh, it was a wonderful moment to talk to. He's in Arizona, near the Phoenix area. And I was just out there in 2001 playing golf. Never knew it at that time. Never knew it. We could have got together. We're going to get together.
Great.
It's just a matter of time. We're going to get together this year. You know, he's much older than I. You know, he was a sergeant, and I was just, you know, a little
Somebody
E3. Yeah, somebody had. You know. But he took a liking to me, and I took a liking to him, and we corresponded briefly 30, 35, 40 years ago, and then we just broke off. You know how it happens.
Yes.
Those are bonds that get formed in an area like that, and that's what's happening to the young people today in Afghanistan and Iraq. They're experiencing what we did so many years ago, and it's something that you can't put into words. You really can't, you know, you can't nail it down, but there's a bond and a friendship that happens that can't be. I remember when we were going into the schools and talking to the history classes about Vietnam, one question that really threw me, you know, and I used to think I was ready for anything, and the one student asked me, said, what was the hardest thing you ever had to do in Vietnam? And I had to think about that, because there were a lot of things that were challenging. You know, the first time you do anything is really challenging, whether it be shooting at somebody or picking up a body or whatever. And as I thought about it, the hardest thing that I had to do in Vietnam was leave, which was really crazy, because I'd been there for 14 months and 13 days, and I wanted to go home more than I wanted anything in the whole wide world. But there was a part of me that was so concerned about these guys that I'm leaving behind.
Who's going to take care of them?
Who's going to take care of them? Yeah. You know, I brought them in as new guys. I got that green off their uniform. You know, they got some idea what they're doing now. But who's going to take care of these guys when I leave? And I wonder which guys. You know, you think up certain names and you look on the wall, hoping that you don't see the name on the book.
Really?
You know, but wondering. And I've had touch with a few of them. But
well, you know, there's still a couple of thousand names that are not on the wall, not in the book, and they ain't home.
Yeah.
And those two, we should never forget.
Yeah, the MIAs always need to be remembered.
Because,
and not only from Vietnam, but from Korea. You know, there were a lot
all
there.
wars All wars.
Yeah, any war. Not the family, not knowing, being the family members.
My
has gotta
uncle's
be terrible.
brother. My uncle's brother is MIA World War II.
Really?
He was from the Pacific. He just went off to war. Never came home. They never got notification of his death. He just ceased to exist. And this is something that's even worse than if one of my friends or one of those people that I was so close to ceased to exist. I don't, you know, that's terrible. That's worse than giving him the final salute and putting him away.
It's an open wound.
It is.
You know, it just never heals. The unknown aspect of it, you know, and you know, and that brings up this question, you know, and I've thought about it, you know, whether or not there were actually MIAs who the North Vietnamese were keeping, you know, were there live prisoners in the North, and I've thought about that, and there may have been at one time, you know, but I mean, the international outrage, you know, they were murdered, they were killed before anybody found out, you know. I mean, you know, but we'll never know.
With the collapse of the Soviet Union, we did find out that some of our men were sent to the Soviet Union. Some of them were pawned off to China. We will never find those people again. But there will never be any reckoning. We don't know who they are. And if it was done once, you know as well as I do. If it's expedient and if it gains you an ally at a hard time, you'll repeat the process.
Well, and in that day, you know, the POWs or the missing in action could be used as a tool. Now that we've got a different type of war, a war on terrorism, they don't hide their MIAs. They make videos and flaunt them and threaten them and threaten us with what they're going to do, which just is a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Guys, I'll tell you, it's, again, we could sit here, hey, but we may have to go to the VFW and continue this without the cameras and stuff, and then we can tell some of those stories that we're thinking of, but we can't say. But I want to.
Are they doing lunch down there today?
I believe they are.
Well,
it's about that.
We'll just go there for
Depending
lunch.
on when you're watching this, I'm sure we could get something. If nothing else, we can order a pizza over there. But Tom, I want to thank you for showing up and doing the program.
Thank
Sam,
you for inviting me.
always appreciate you seeing you as a friend.
And there's some Vietnam vets still out there that, you know, are still dealing with it, you know, a little bit. Come on in, you know.
Exactly.
Welcome home.
Come on,
welcome
VFW.
home.
Welcome home,
Welcome
Sam.
home. Thank you. Thank
Larry,
you.
Thank you, man.
home.
Appreciate both of you guys. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of Veteran Voice, and we hope you'll continue to tune in and see us next time. Thank you very much.
Super.